Welcome to Gary Talks. In the past, I did an episode where I looked at my top 10 favorite series finales, and while it is very important to stick the landing, it's also super important for a show to have a great pilot episode. It's really hard to do one because you need to introduce a lot of the major characters, some major plot points, and really let the audience know exactly what type of show they're going to see. So in today's episode, I'm going to look at my top 10 favorite TV pilots of all time. Now you'd think having a successful pilot would mean that a show is going to be great from beginning to end, but as you'll see from my list, more often than not, these shows still went off the rails some way before they ended. A great example of that is my number 10 favorite pilot, Westworld. The first episode of HBO's Westworld was a slow-motion mind bomb. Artificial intelligence, moral philosophy, and gunfights wrapped in prestige TV aesthetics so polished, it practically had its own consciousness. What made the pilot brilliant wasn't just the mystery, but the confidence. You didn't get hand-holding or exposition dumps. You got Anthony Hopkins monologuing about evolution while a piano played Black Hole Sun. It told the audience, keep up or get trampled by a robot horse. In retrospect, Westworld may have collapsed under its own complexity, but that pilot? It was flawless. It promised a puzzle box built by gods, and for one glorious hour, we believed. Next up at number 9 is another show that certainly didn't end as strongly as it began. But the first couple seasons were really fun, and the pilot set the tone for that. Coming in at number 9, Prison Break. Prison Break was pure mid-2000s network gold. The premise alone was irresistible. A man gets himself locked in prison to save his brother from execution. But that pilot? It hooked you instantly. The pacing was relentless, the stakes immediate, and that tattoo reveal, a full prison blueprint inked across Wentworth Miller's torso, was one of those holy hell TV moments that made you miss your TiVo remote. What's wild is how cinematic it felt for a Fox show in 2005. Every shot, every line was soaked in sweaty tension. It was the kind of network pilot that didn't just promise a story, it promised momentum. Number 8 on my top 10 list is Mr. Robot. If David Fincher's Fight Club and The Matrix had a paranoid millennial child raised on Red Bull and Reddit threads, it would be Mr. Robot. That pilot was a lightning bolt. Moody, claustrophobic, and instantly iconic. Rami Malek's performance drew you like static electricity. You could feel the isolation buzzing in his delivery. What made it special was how it reflected the digital age's anxiety in real time. Hacking, loneliness, the illusion of freedom online. The show turned code and capitalism into cinematic poetry. It was rebellion through storytelling. A whispered wake up dressed in a black hoodie. Coming in at number 7 is a show that proves that sometimes it's better to end when the show is still going strong. But that pilot was marvelous. The Walking Dead. That opening shot, a sheriff walking through an empty highway littered with abandoned cars and silence, that was the moment AMC told us, we're not making a zombie show, we're making art about humanity. Frank Darabont directed the pilot like it was an indie film with apocalypse-level stakes. It wasn't about gore, it was about loneliness, dread, and how civilization fades when no one's left to maintain it. The image of Rick Grimes riding into a corpse-filled Atlanta on horseback is one of the great visual metaphors in TV history. The Old West colliding with the end of the world. The series lost its way eventually, but that first hour, it was haunting, heartfelt, and cinematic in a way that most pilots never reach. If you had high expectations for some of the other shows to end well, this one is the one that disappointed all of us the most. But that pilot? It really set the stage for what could have been one of the greatest shows of all time, Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones pilot is a fascinating paradox, a near-total reshoot of an earlier disaster that somehow became the blueprint for a cultural juggernaut. From that chilling cold open north of the Wall to Ned Stark's quiet nobility in Winterfell, you immediately felt the weight of history and consequence. It juggled 20 characters, 5 kingdoms, and White Walkers, and somehow it made sense. The craftsmanship was staggering. It didn't just promise a story, it promised a world. The pilot ended with Jaime pushing Bran from a tower, a literal shove into chaos, and we were hooked. Coming in at number 5 is the strangest pilot on my list, Twin Peaks. Before Twin Peaks, television was about tidy resolutions. David Lynch looked at that and said, "What if the mystery never ends?" The pilot played like a dream you couldn't shake, part soap opera, part horror show, part abstract art installation. The discovery of Laura Palmer's body wasn't just a plot point, it was the death of conventional storytelling. The mood, the music, the absurdity, it all worked because Lynch didn't care if you got it, he wanted you to feel it. It turned small-town Americana into something uncanny and unforgettable. Proof that television could be surreal, cinematic, and deeply weird long before prestige TV was a brand. Of all the shows on the list that started great and ended poorly, this one is the worst. Because the first season was basically perfect, and the pilot set the stage for that. One of the greatest pilots to ever be on network TV, This Is Us. Network TV had been declared dead, and then This Is Us arrived, slapped everyone with emotions, and reminded us that sincerity could still go viral. That pilot is a masterclass in structure. Multiple storylines woven together with warmth and precision, all building to that gut punch of a reveal that ties everything together. It didn't need dragons or zombies, it had heart. And in an age of irony and detachment, that was revolutionary. The show became a weekly therapy session America willingly tuned in for, and it all started with that perfect, tear-duct engineering of a pilot. Finally, we get to a show that ended just as great as it began. You guys all know it's one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and is one of the greatest pilots ever made. Coming in at number 3, Breaking Bad. The brilliance of the Breaking Bad pilot lies in its simplicity. A man in his underwear in the desert with a gun, and somehow you're on his side. Vince Gilligan built a moral time bomb and lit the fuse in episode 1. Every shot, every cut, every line of dialogue was meticulous. By the time Walter White said chemistry is the study of change, you knew this was something different. The pilot didn't just introduce a story, it redefined the anti-hero for a new century. It was tragic, funny, horrifying, and like its subject, addictive. My number 2 favorite pilot is the episode that most people would list as their number 1 favorite show, but for me there was one slightly better, but still, it is a great pilot. It could be taught in school on how do you make a great first episode. That is Lost. If The Walking Dead made Apocalypse feel intimate, Lost made it feel operatic. That pilot was a Hollywood blockbuster masquerading as network television. The plane crash sequence still holds up as one of the most jaw-dropping openings ever filmed for TV. But the real magic was the mystery, that creeping sense that this wasn't just survival. It was destiny, science fiction, and philosophy braided into one impossible riddle. Guys, where are we? Became the question that haunted an entire generation of viewers. Lost redefined what a TV pilot could do. It didn't just introduce a show, it launched an obsession. And now for my favorite pilot of all time. And what is shocking about this is this show also had my number 1 favorite series finale of all time. So it just shows how great a show is that the beginning episode was my favorite and the ending episode is my favorite. Coming in at number 1, The Shield. If Breaking Bad was the slow burn of moral decay, The Shield was the explosion. That pilot hits like a brick through stained glass. It's raw, unflinching, and utterly fearless. The opening sequence throws you into the chaos of a corrupt LAPD strike team, and by the end, you're breathless and complicit. Michael Chiklis' Vic Mackey was a new breed of TV character. Not the hero we love to hate, but the villain we couldn't stop watching. That closing twist, the execution in the final scene, wasn't just shocking, it was seismic. It told audiences we're burning down the old rules of television. The Shield didn't just launch the anti-hero era, it detonated it. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure and join me next week when I look at my top 10 favorite albums of the 1960s. See you then.
From capes to tapes, Gary's on the case. He's breaking down each scene, every place. On Gary Talks, he's quick with his peculiar wits. From plot twists to the comic strips, Gary's